Well, I like the choice of what we've got today. A little bit at the end of Romans tells teachers to teach. I've spent quite a lot of time as a teacher. I've worked in a university for 10 years and I worked in a secondary school for 10 years, so I think I probably need to step up and do some things which you might recognise as being teaching. Let's see how we get on with that. And it does say that in one of the verses of the hymn we just sung, take my intellect and use, oh my goodness me, I've got to get my brain in gear as well. So there we go. Let's see how we get on. So this is a very interesting reading. It's a very interesting reading. It's a reading that pops up, obviously, at St. Peter's Tide in the middle of the year when people are getting ordained. And it's very strongly associated with, frankly, it's very strongly associated with Rome and the Pope in Rome. But as you know, we're Anglicans, and the Pope in Rome has no jurisdiction over us, as it says in the Book of Common Prayer. So we will make some remarks that are not about Rome and not about the Pope. I want to say, what is the point of this reading for us? And more to the point, for us living on Tyneside in 2026, and how do we connect with it? Because it's a mysterious thing, really. Jesus is right on the edge of the country, which we might call Israel, and we might call the Holy Land. So he's right at the top end, the north end. It's a bit like going up to, I don't know, Cheviot or somewhere like that. And he's right at the edge of civilization, and if he went down the far side, he'd be down into Damascus and into Syria. And he's right on the edge, and he's looking back down Israel and thinking, how are we getting on? How is this going? Does anyone understand what I'm doing? And he asks the disciples, well, okay, what have you made of me so far? And they're very good scholars. They have a go at some answers. They put their hands up and make various suggestions, and they're all from the past. So, what have we got? We've got John the Baptist, who's dead by now. We've got Elijah, who's been dead a long time, but also came from the north country like Jesus. And Jeremiah, who's a long dead person, or one of the prophets, and most of those are dead. So, are you telling me, says Jesus in the back of his head, you're telling me I'm dead? So what is this? What is going on? How does this work? Simon Peter tries something more interesting. He goes into the future, and everyone's waiting for this Messiah to turn up. And he says, ha, you're here. You're the Messiah. And better still, he uses another little phrase, which is interesting, which is the Son of the living God. The Son of the living God. Powerful stuff, very powerful stuff. He's got a very strong sense. I mean, he gives Jesus a bundle of stuff, really. It's like an over-enthusiastic child, just sort of thrusting all the toys at you. And he gives this idea that it's been an experience of God that he's got out of Jesus. And I think that's the bit that really comes out of this for me. That Peter is bold enough to say, you're something to do with God. He puts it in a muddled way, in a quite confusing way, but that's what he says. And Jesus is encouraging. He's really, really encouraging. And he says, it's not flesh and blood's revealed it to you, so you haven't learnt it from anyone else. But God has been thinking inside your brain. And when you've been dealing with the question I've given you, God has helped you come up with an answer. And you have noticed something about God. And that is something that God has given you. I mean, these days we would say that's the Holy Spirit speaking through Peter. You might say that, right? You might say, God is speaking through Peter. And it's really useful. It helps the disciples understand what's going on a bit. And it's a thing to help their understanding. We're about halfway through Matthew's Gospel at this point. And it really helps the the unfolding of what Matthew's describing in terms of who Jesus is. The whole of Matthew's Gospel is about who Jesus is. And it begins with this hope that a child will be born, and we have this baby born, and the kings from outside Israel come and say, "Where is the King of the Jews?" So they've got a king thing going on, and the Messiah thing's a bit like that. And by the time we get to the end, we know that Jesus is the one who dies and rises. And Matthew gives us that right at the end. And we're meant to go out and tell everybody about it. But telling everybody about it and writing about it is not for this point in Caesarea Philippi. What does Jesus say? He says, bizarrely, don't tell anybody. Don't tell anybody. But he does say something else as well. He says that Peter is going to have responsibility for the links between the world and God. And Peter and the rest of the church, because Peter is going to be the rock on which the church is built. So he's just the foundation stones. But the church that's been built up over the years, 2,000 of them now, that church is going to have a responsibility to make a connection between God and people. And if you are like Peter, you are members of the church, and you are going to try and make connections for people between God and their lives. And what does he say? He says, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. So what on earth does that mean? It's a very strange expression. I have a son who works for the Archbishop of Canterbury as his lawyer. And they write very strange documents indeed. One of the ones that gives a great deal of joy to people is they produce what are called common licenses. And when somebody needs to get married quickly, and this happened a lot during COVID, because people had been living together for years and they'd never got married, and now they were very sick, and they wanted to make sure that they died married. You could think of all sorts of practical reasons why that would be a good idea. And Mark prepared all the documents for that. And what was happening at that point was the registrars were not able to do the marriages. But the Archbishop of Canterbury, bizarrely, has an ancient medieval right to loose people from the restrictions of the law. Anyway, this is the only example I can think of, really, to loose things. And I mean, I'm not suggesting we'll go and become lawyers for the Archbishop of Canterbury. So what would that be about? What would it be about? So I was trying to think, when have I loosed anybody from troubles and that sort of thing? And I was trying to think about this quite hard. We used to have, I did say at the beginning, I was in a parish which was full of people who were arriving in London. It was a landing place for lots of people. And we had a mass of people from all sorts of different nations and countries and different parts of England. And I mean, I was a migrant from the northeast of England, for God's sake. And it was, we were all mixed up together. We were all trying to find our way. And it was a bit of a chaotic time. And you may remember that under Theresa May as Prime Minister, there was a thing called the hostile environment. I don't know if you remember that. It was in the news a lot. Anyway, it was very important to us because my vicarage, like this one, was on a main road. And at about 4 and 5 o'clock in the morning, the border force would send minibuses down the back lane right by us. And they were going around picking up people who they suspected of being illegal migrants. And anyway, I had members of my congregation who were thus arrested. And I had one young man, he was descended from a family from Nigeria, but he had lived since he was 9 or 10 in London, and he was now 32. And the rest of his family all had British citizenship. but he didn't, because he was in, anyway, complicated business. It was a mess basically. But he was taken off and incarcerated in a G4S building on the edge of Gatwick Airport. And the plan was they were going to stick him and a whole lot of other people on an aeroplane and fly them out to Nigeria. Anyway, I wrote to the Home Office about this, and I said that this seems to me to be highly irregular, and it doesn't seem to me to be British justice. And I rang up G4S, God help me, and I cycled around the edge of the perimeter road at Gatwick Airport to try and visit this man in prison, because Jesus says you should visit people in prison. Anyway, I was told to go to hell, basically. So that was a lot of good. But I was able to talk to Donatus, for that was his name, and he said they are trying to take this out at this very moment, and the whole place is in lockdown, and we are expected to be put on board an aircraft. Anyway, it didn't happen. It's G4S, they couldn't do it. They were badly organised. Anyway, he was transferred by bus to another secure setting next to Heathrow. And he was in prison without trial for 18 months. And I kept writing to the Home Office. And eventually somebody on the radio, I think it was Radio 4, carried out an investigation into some of these people, and Donatus was in the bundle of people who were done. And then, miraculously, he appeared in church. And I wouldn't like to say that I did it, but I was part of many people who were doing it. There was a lot of people who found the injustice of this outrageous, and the bad behaviour. And I found myself, I'd never trained to do any of this stuff at all. I just write letters. And I think that was an example for me about loosing, yeah? And I was trying to work out what the binding bit was. Years ago, I started working on the very first safeguarding policy for the House of Bishops. It was back in 1992. We wrote a very short policy. It was about this long. Anyway, but we were the first people to do it. And I've been working on safeguarding ever since. And I worked for the Independent Safeguarding Authority down in Darlington for a bit. And I think that is about. I think that's probably about binding, because it's about just saying to people in public spaces, watch how you go, see how you behave with care and attention, look after children and vulnerable adults, and be kind to them. And just hold back a bit. Don't be too obsessed with your own needs. Don't be too obsessed with trying to be in charge of a situation and abuse the situation, obviously. Anyway, I was trying to think about these things. I don't know what you've got up to in your lives. You are also a good age, in many of you, as I am, and you will have stories of your own where you just think to yourself, do you know, when so-and-so was having a difficult time, when they, I don't know, when my wife had a baby, a kind friend came round with a casserole, which was absolutely a really helpful thing, to have some cooked food ready. And we were in chaos when we had our first child, and it was so nice to have a bit of food we could eat. And that was liberating. It was loosing us. So I say to you this morning, what do I say to you? I say that we are members of the church, and we are given by God messages about this Jesus is really important. And going through what happened to Jesus in his life is really important, because there are little clues in that help us understand our own place in the world. And Jesus encourages us by what he says and what he does, the examples we get in the Gospels. And we are people who live alongside our neighbours and people we bump into and people we've never met before, like my encounters with Donatus. And we are there to help and to encourage and to open up people, but we're also there to say, hang on a minute, mate, just hang back a bit. And it will help people. They will benefit from the open lives that they're given, and they'll also benefit from not making a fool of themselves. So that's what I think this gospel this morning is about. And thank you very much for listening.